So welcome back to Everything Marketplaces. We talk with founders and leaders in some of today's top marketplaces. So this is episode 55, and I'm really excited to welcome on Kuljeev Singh, who's the founder and CEO of ResQ. So ResQ is a SaaS-enabled marketplace that makes it easy for restaurants to manage their repairs and maintenance. They can instead focus on the customer. It's used by over 3,000 restaurants, has quickly scaled to a team of over 60, and raised from some top early-stage venture funds. So Kuljeev, welcome to the group chat, and it's definitely great to have you join us here today. I'd like to do a deep dive in ResQ as a SaaS-enabled marketplace, since that's a very unique business model and marketplace type. But before we do, maybe you can start off by sharing a little bit more on your background for those that don't know you and what led you to start ResQ.
Absolutely. No, thank you. Appreciate inviting me for the conversation today. Really excited to dive into all exciting things about marketplaces and the changing dynamics of marketplaces. Who would have thought this whole thing called SaaS-enabled marketplaces would exist a few years ago when we only talked about mostly consumer marketplaces? A bit about my background. So I'll go a bit back. I was actually, born and raised in the Middle East, came to Canada for education, and went to University of Waterloo here, graduated at the peak of the financial crisis and did a few years in private equity coming out of school. Got an opportunity to become a founding team member at a venture capital firm. A serial entrepreneur who built and sold a few tech companies in his career, was starting a VC firm. I convinced him to take me under his wing as he was starting the venture capital firm, and we started the firm together back in 2011, I believe. Again, partners. In the 8 years I was there, we built and scaled one of the fastest growing VC funds in the country, over 250 million raised across 3 different funds. I led several investments, sat on several boards. So really got a great sort of opportunity to view the entrepreneurial world from one, as a founding team member and growing and scaling a VC fund. Many people oversee that is actually like starting a company as well. You got to raise capital, you got to get your product right, you got to get your you deliver to your customers. But secondly, also being a part and working with many founders over the course of the years. And somewhere along the way, I had started doing some angel investing and stumbled upon a restaurant owner who was looking to get out of the restaurant business. They built and scaled their restaurant. It was doing well from a top line perspective. But I believe they kind of hit the stride in terms of where they wanted to take it. So I thought it was a good opportunity. Always been keen about the restaurant space. Bought that restaurant from them 2 years ago, and right off the bat, in the early days of us owning the restaurant, saw this pain point around repair and maintenance, and generally the back of the house being a key challenge. Like new owners of in the restaurant space, we wanted to focus on the front of the house, the guest experience, the food, the menu, all sorts of cool things. And many operators oversee what it truly takes to run a restaurant operation. And we were victims of that. We had several issues early days around repair and maintenance, lost tens of thousands of dollars in not being able to fix these issues, get contractors out on time. And that led me to sort of go down this pathway of figuring out what are the solutions out there on how fast growing and scaling restaurant groups are managing their operations and their back of the house, and realized there was not much product at the time. Most innovation in the restaurant industry has happened in front of the house. If you look at DoorDash and Uber and Ritual and all the great companies that are driving more revenue and more customers into the door. But if you truly look at operationally what happens behind the kitchen, there's very little to almost no innovation that's happened there. So after discovering the problem, doing a lot of research, talking to many restaurant operators and validating the problem, decided that I was gonna take the entrepreneurial leap and started the company officially a few years ago. That's been the journey.
That's awesome. That's quite the experience on both sides, and then as an operator. So I think thanks for sharing with us on that. So I want to jump into the early days and the story of starting it as a marketplace. But before we do, could you maybe break down ResQ as a marketplace and maybe some unique aspects of it as a SaaS-enabled marketplace?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, our evolution to become a SaaS-enabled marketplace didn't happen overnight. It took us some time to get there and many iterations to get there. Early days when we started, in order to really test the problem out and see, how do customers react? How do we get our service partners, who is essentially our supply side of our business, to get out there? What are the key problems we're solving for them? Before even building a product, we literally just started going door to door to restaurants and started handing them a 1-800 phone number and telling them if something breaks, give this number a call and we'll find a service partner for you. Just to really understand what are the key challenges. Are they willing to pay for something like this? Can we actually get service partners out there? Can we drive new growth to them? Before product, before anything, so it was kind of like our hack or our, cheap way to like discover and learn about the problem. And that took off. In the first few months, we had many restaurants signed up, essentially calling this 1-800 phone number, which we still have, by the way, if anything broke, and we would go and sort of scramble our way through finding, service partners or contractors per se, and getting this delivered. Then we started sort of learning from that experience and said, okay, our first product is going to be a mobile first product, because our customer base at the time, we had some multiple unit operators, but mainly kind of in the longer tail of independent groups, which anything on their phone and, the ability to quickly put in a work order, something is broken, and get someone out there. That was the key product. And what we would essentially do is take a small revenue share from our service partners, our supply side, to be able to drive sort of net new growth to them, and just purely concentrated at the time only in Toronto, which was our backyard and where we started the company. We sort of like kept pushing that and kept, continuing to learn from the customers, continuing to build the right sort of mobile first product. And a few sort of years later, COVID hit us early in 2020, and our sort of the world changed overnight. I still remember March 16, 2020, which in Canada, they had shut down the entire sort of country, and every single restaurant was forced to shut down. We were growing and scaling fast, but we saw a massive decline because restaurants were shut down and they were not set up for delivery, or they were not operational. So what we essentially had to do was quickly understand what is the customer base that is going to come live the fastest, who are ready to be equipped with delivery and sort of like other sort of drive-throughs and delivery and walk-ins, and what's the right product for them. So after testing that, talking to many folks, we realized that we were going to go into very, very early on in COVID. We realized we were going to go upstream into sort of multi-unit operators, where a single group owns, anywhere from 5, but could be up to hundreds of restaurants within the same umbrella. It could be a large franchisee, or it could be independent group. And the problems that they have, even though repair and maintenance key problem is slightly different, it's not just about the core experience at the ground level to deliver a service that's cheaper, better, faster. It's also data, insights, workflows, approvals, thresholds, accounting integrations, and all sorts of interesting things that a big company, a big franchisee group of KFC, for example, that owns hundreds of restaurants, require, because they operate very different from a single unit operator. A single unit operator is the owner using the product, getting someone out, getting the repair done. At a group that owns hundreds of restaurants, you got field teams reporting to area managers, reporting to regional managers, reporting to COOs, and just like an entire structure. And that requires a different sort of workflow to begin with. So very, very early on, I believe it was back in April, when we discovered this QSR vertical, the multi-unit vertical, and the core sort of value proposition we can provide them, we started building product very, very quickly and released it into the market. I believe it was only 30 or 45 days out from the start of COVID. And that took off. We changed our pricing model around it. We essentially went from purely a B2B mobile first transaction marketplace to a SaaS enabled, still B2B, of course, because you've got restaurants on one side and you've got service partners who are also businesses on the other side, but a SaaS enabled marketplaces where the core product offering became essentially a piece of product software that allowed them to do everything from workflows to data to insights to approvals, thresholds, to all the stuff that I said. And in the background, still the core marketplace was providing the value where anyone on the ground could submit a job, request a repair that needed to be done, and we would essentially build localized supply to get the supply out there as soon as possible. And that all tied together into this great looking software, which created a tremendous amount of value for big groups. So now, and we've seen tremendous growth on that product now that we've repositioned the company, all in the back of learning from earlier on in COVID. Great amount of growth, launched new markets, which I'm happy to talk about. But essentially, we didn't, our vision around it was we were a mobile first transactional marketplace. And in many ways, COVID forced us to sort of get out of our comfort zone and look at new opportunities and new sort of ICP or ideal customer profile. And that has been tremendously successful for us.
That's super interesting. Yeah, thanks for sharing more with us on that. So I'm definitely curious to learn more about, as the market changes and the customer needs kind of change, and it sounds like a fairly big bet, with the shift in the company. How did you think through introducing more of the kind of SaaS offering, and then, what are maybe some kind of learnings as you introduced that to customers and kind of took that to market?
Yeah, it's a good question. Look, the way we sort of early days we thought about this, as we started talking to, at that time, try picking up the phone and calling a restaurant in April 2020. Like it was just a bad situation out there. But we knew the KFCs, the Pizza Huts, the Arby's, the Wendy's of the world were open. They had drive-thrus, they had walk-ins. Many of them even had delivery platforms set up. So what we did was essentially started either through the network or directly reaching out to these folks to learn about their repair and maintenance challenges. And everyone we spoke to within an organization, even though the underlying problems were the same, but had a different sort of sub-problem to it. The facility manager or the sort of person on the ground at the restaurant, their biggest challenge was getting a repair done in the cheapest and the fastest way possible. When you look at area managers, their problems are, I've got 10 different restaurants that reported to me, and I'm dealing with approvals on a location by location level through text messages or through sort of phone calls, and we have no way to track what we're doing. When you talk to the COO or the CEO, very different challenges. Where's the data and insights? Why are we spending so much more on repair and maintenance at location X versus location Y? How much have we truly spent on repair maintenance? Being able to sort of put in audits and controls and thresholds across the organization to manage R&M, which typically operates in this black box. So as we started to learn that, our vision around what the product could look like started to change very fast in a very positive way, which is that if we tie all the pieces of the organization into a single product, we can layer all these sort of product offerings and value propositions to each stakeholder in the organization. And as we thought through, and I'll go back maybe a few years back when the vision of ResQ, repair and maintenance is starting point, but the broader opportunity for us is all of back of house. We believe there is a tremendous amount of opportunity in how equipment is procured and parts and that. Like there's several things we can do to basically own the entire experience from the back of the house perspective. And as we were sort of that vision aligned with the learnings we were going through early in COVID, made us realize that product, what it could look like, essentially could get us to that vision much faster than just a simple mobile first transactional product. So it was true to our core vision, but the learning from talking to customers, whether those are existing customers or potential ones, talking to service partners, obviously learning from the supply side of the business on what challenges they were facing, and really thoughtfully sort of putting our heads down and picking the right bets. A lot of credit goes to the team, of course, for being able to execute at that level of resilience, even after seeing a sort of big hit from COVID. But that's what it was. It's just staying true to our DNA, which is talk to customers, talk to service partners, learn from them quickly, stay true to your vision, but always be, challenging yourself and evolving and your thinking around what is it that is going to provide the best value to both the sides of the spectrum for us.
Certainly. And that's definitely great to hear. So you did bring up the point as far as, the team, and hats off to the team. So could you share more about, what like the team size today and kind of the org structure?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were a team of just shy of 20 people at the start of COVID. And we were growing even at that time. I believe, 6 months prior to that, the team was maybe half the size. So we were still growing. But when we obviously, as we sort of looked, as COVID hit us, as we looked further out, with our advisors and everyone around the board, it became very clear to us that this is not something that's just going to be around us for the next 3 to 6 months, and it may disappear. This may be with us for a longer stretch of time, could even last a couple of years, and that's exactly the scenario we're in. So we had to thoughtfully think through, are we just going to survive as a business and get through this patch, or are we going to do things differently and figure out a way to thrive? The latter is very, very difficult because it really requires you to, continue to maintain your burn when the business is at a different state, and continue to grow and scale the team, and push your sort of limits on thinking through what's the right product you want to build and how do you take it to market in a thoughtful manner and launch and grow new regions. So I'd say the latter was much more difficult, but that's the path we took, because that's been the DNA of the company. It's all been around resilience from day one. And look, it's paid off very, very well for us. We've grown over 8x in the last 12 to 14 months. Our team has tripled in size. We've gone from just being in Toronto pre-COVID in a single city to now being across 7 different states in the US and across most provinces in Canada. So we'll call it North America wide at this point, with customers within franchisees or independent groups of all the sort of major brands across KFC and Tim Hortons and Pizza Hut and Pizza, Arby's, Wendy's, and even independent groups that are growing fast. So those bets that we had, and the sort of thoughtfulness that we had earlier on in making the right decisions and picking the thrive but not just to survive direction, paid off really well for us. And I'd say all the credit goes to the team for being able to sort of wake up every morning, deal with the challenges that our industry, as the restaurant industry, was facing in one of the most difficult eras that this industry has faced, but still be able to come out of it so strong.
Yeah, it's definitely very impressive to see the recent growth on that. So congrats to you and the team on that. So I had a question. You kind of mentioned a little bit earlier as far as the markets that you operate in, but like what is the kind of playbook that you use to launch in new markets?
Yeah, great question. So look, we're very true to kind of the core definition of software SaaS-enabled marketplaces, which is, in sort of very simple words, like come for the software, stay for the network. The software itself is so powerful that even if we're not in a new market, the customers sign up for the software itself, even to the level where they're willing to bring their own supply onto the network. And as we build more density or more customers within that region, then the network becomes very strong, because now you can match demand and supply and truly build a quote unquote marketplace. But our go-to-market strategy, earlier days pre-COVID, was very regional, city by city, launch marketplaces from day one, make them profitable, move on to the next one. Obviously, we've done it in Toronto and small pockets outside of Toronto. But we took a slightly different approach because of the SaaS-enabled marketplace that allowed us to go much broader. And now we're in, again, many major cities across North America and launching more and more as we speak, because the core thesis is come for the software, stay for the network, and additional products over time.
Awesome. So, and just to drill down on that a little bit more. So, how are you selling into some of the restaurant, I guess, like the management groups, as you mentioned, and then, what does that process look like, where they typically kind of bring their suppliers or providers, on the platform and within the network?
Yeah. So, and we've been testing with various strategies over the last year or so, but what's working extremely well for us that we're doubling down on now is sort of high cadence SMB inside sales selling, which is like you've got a BDR team, and essentially you're trying to cast a wide net within defined geographies to build density. Our sales sort of moves very, very fast. Let's say, average sales cycle less than 30 days, going from initial conversation to fully closing these accounts. And then we've got a marketplace team, and their responsibility is to bring supply on board very, very quickly, because most of the customers will end up bringing the supply onto the network. And then over time, as we have enough demand and enough supply, being able to sort of layer in product on both the sides and truly build a marketplace. But it's a high frequency inside sales model that we've taken to market. Now, again, that has been after testing several things. And look, the core that's working sort of exceptionally strong for us is this land and expand strategy. Because of the type of customer base we're dealing with, multi-unit operators, there's a lot of advocacy that you see within franchisees and within groups. Restaurant owners know many folks. So if something is working exceptionally well for them within their restaurants, they would certainly advocate about you to other groups. So a big majority of our sort of growth actually comes from the expand piece of the land and expand.
That's really interesting. I know that's probably going to prompt a few questions here when we get to the questions. So on that note, what kind of metrics are you optimizing for, or kind of KPIs?
Yeah, it's been a good evolution on that front as well. But pre-COVID, metrics were very much focused on true sort of like GMV, take rate, the typical things that you hear marketplaces measure them on. I'd say that's still very true. Internally, that's how we look at it, but we've got more depth to it. So now we take a look at true net revenue, because our revenue streams are not just marketplace revenue, it's also subscription revenue that will layer on top. So we kind of have to balance that. So we take a look at true net revenue. But at the core of it, we're still looking at how, what's the true take rate at a market by market level. When a market starts, maybe take rate is zero, but we're making subscription revenue off the bat, of course, from day one. But like, how quickly can we scale that marketplace to start making sort of, truly marketplace or transactional revenue from that perspective. So I'd say the DNA is still very much marketplace metrics, but overarching, we take a look at a lot of the SaaS metrics around subscriptions and net revenue retention and things of those sorts.
Really interesting. And then too, could you maybe share more about the fundraising journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll share at a very high level. We're just actually about to announce our round. So I'll keep that information with me. It's literally coming out in the next week or so. But we recently closed a round with sort of top tier investor groups, both across Silicon Valley, Canada, New York, and beyond, and have been very, very fortunate to have a very well put together investor group and board and advisors, and also a very sort of strong group of angel investors as well. But yeah, we just closed a round recently. We're planning to, based on the growth we're seeing, our goal is to get ready for the next round of financing sometime later this year, early next year. But well capitalized from that perspective with some very top tier funds, which we'll be announcing very, very soon.
We heard it here first, so congrats on that in advance. So I know when I shared it on Twitter, I saw some engagement from a few pretty top funds. So I can guess on that.
So you already know, looking at who liked or retweeted that when these groups start.
Exactly, right. Awesome. Well, we're going to jump in here to some questions here in a little bit. Before we do, I'm curious, as far as SaaS enabled marketplaces is quite the topic, right? So are there maybe some kind of like unique insights or kind of key learnings throughout your journey? And I know this is quite the journey, with COVID and everything. But some that you would maybe like to share with us as early stage marketplace founders.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, there's been a lot of learnings, and learnings at a very sort of overarching level from a business go-to-market standpoint, but down to very, very granular level too. If you think about like, how do you run your support functions? How do you run your customer success function? How do you run your sales team? From an overarching standpoint, one of the key things that SaaS-enabled marketplaces does, if you're able to really build that value, you can build SaaS-enabled marketplaces in every single sector. You have to sort of like really understand who the key stakeholders are within your customer base, and can you sort of like through the software product and then to the marketplace provide enough value across the spectrum. But one sort of advantage it had, which we didn't realize up until maybe 6 months ago, was like actually SaaS-enabled marketplaces versus true marketplaces allow you to go truly broad, and it does not leave a lot of sort of regional dependency on you. If you look at true marketplaces, some great marketplaces that have been built, raising enormous amounts of capital, you need teams on the ground. You need to build localized demand, localized supply, especially if they're a consumer marketplace. You need to think about sort of how each city operates very, very differently than the other one. What we've seen is, in some shape or form, with SaaS-enabled marketplace, you truly act like a software business. We're actually running our entire operations across all major states in the US and provinces in Canada, right here in Toronto. Like the entire team is based out of here. We don't have localized teams in each and every city to build demand and supply. So that's a key advantage, because it allows you to go broad and it allows you to go very quickly. The second thing is, if you're truly sort of unit economic driven, it starts to sort of make revenue for you from day one because of the subscription layers. If your software, if the product you're building can actually provide that value, which is you don't have to fundamentally depend on eventually making revenue and contribution margins at some point in your cycle later on. So that's a key advantage for us, and then you layer in with marketplace and sort of like other values. But one sort of, so that's kind of the overarching go-to-market learnings that we've had over the last 12 months. If I go in a bit deeper, I think we realized this again, wasn't like a very clear from day one. As a true marketplace, you think about how you run customer success, customer support, customer service, sales to some extent in a very different and maybe more transactional manner. Versus what we have realized over the course of time is like you can't run that in a transaction. Now, it may be very different from other marketplaces. I will mention the caveat for us, because we have small businesses in particular, but businesses on both the sides of the spectrum. You have to almost run your business operationally, keeping that mindset, that you sort of like at the support level or at the operational level, you're building, or you're building some level of sort of like software, org structure. So, we've gone from like customer success being super transactional across all accounts to now customer success team owning certain accounts. Typically what a software company would do or a SaaS company would do. Sales, very similar. Customer support, we're changing that right now. So, and that's with all learnings. We tested out the true marketplace model, which is very transactional, ticket by ticket support, to now saying, actually, there's some key learnings and you have to deliver value because you're dealing with businesses on both the sides to provide support from a like how SaaS companies are run, but the underlying sort of core DNA can still be the marketplace. So it's a very unique balance between the two. You have to learn from both the sides, and you can't truly be like, oh, well, I want to build a core marketplace, but realizing, no, you're actually building a SaaS marketplace. And that sort of muscle to learn and evolve, the quicker you can do is very, very beneficial. But we've seen internally, whether it's operations or CS or sales or entire sort of like customer function, we've seen a major shift in how we were running it even 12 months ago to how we're running it today, because we're evolving and learning more and more about how to provide that level of support to our customers.
Awesome. Yeah, that's incredibly interesting, and I'm definitely super curious about it myself. I'll probably jump in here with some questions in a little bit. I want to let those that are on come on, but yeah. So I run a transactional marketplace. It's a little bit different mindset, and I'm definitely curious to learn more. So let's jump into questions, though, if that sounds good to you. Hey, Lucas, did you want to jump on?
Yes, I would love to. Thank you very much for sharing. That was very interesting. My question would be in regard to why the restaurant business. That was my first question when I saw what ResQ is about, and now I know obviously you're coming from there. And in some terms, that specialization, that horizontal specialization of marketplaces is a trend we can see. But then again, we also had TaskRabbit on here a couple of weeks ago, which is the more general, hey, as a craftsman that you might want to hire as a consumer. So I wanted to ask, first, is your supply a specialized supply? So is there a specialized restaurant worksman, or is this the regular worksman that you are hiring? And now that you have this beautiful thing set up, do you see any other horizontals that you can move into? Yeah, because everything is set up, you know how to deal with franchises, businesses, branches that you can maybe leverage there later, or is this out of scope for now?
Absolutely, it's a great question, Lucas. So I can answer both questions. So on the first one, the short answer is yes. The supply side for generally, I would say it's commercial repair and maintenance. Now restaurant sits within the commercial, but the commercial bucket is much broader. If you think about hotels, retirement homes, grocery stores, convenience stores, anywhere there's commercial equipment or commercial HVAC in it, is different from the supply that a consumer gets at home, where it's much more, it's different. Like at home, you may have some equipment issues, but most of the issues may to do with plumbing or handiwork or electrical things. And every now and then you kind of sprinkle in some equipment related things. At a restaurant, the licensing, the certifications, the warranty coverage, the experience to deal with large rooftop HVAC units is very, very different. So supply is mostly specialized. You do have some overlap. If you look at certain sort of long tail of the categories, like I mentioned, maybe some plumbing, maybe some handiwork, maybe to some extent even some electrical work, that could overlap between the two, but generally the two sides are a bit different. What we deal, and I think this is one consistent thread between the two, but what we deal consistently across the two sides is whether it's supply on the restaurant side or on the consumer side, both are businesses, right? They're not, and not anyone can wake up and say, I'm going to start going and fixing some HVAC units today. You have to go through training, you have to get your licensing, you have to probably work as an apprentice for someone for a few years. So it's a bit of a journey. And that's where we think that we're going to create a business in a box concept on that side, which I can get to deeper if you're interested on what the supply pieces are. But one key differentiator outside of what I mentioned on the supply side for both the sides, and generally about repair and maintenance for both the sides, where differences with, firms like Handy or TaskRabbit comes in. A restaurant R&M business is relatively much more higher frequency. So something at a restaurant, and I can give you sort of like active metrics, like on average, something breaks at a restaurant within ResQ at least once a week on average across the board. Versus as a consumer, you're probably dealing with an issue, I don't know, at best once a month, maybe once a couple of months. So very, very high frequency on the restaurant side. And it's very, very mission critical. Imagine if you walk into a restaurant, I'm sure many of you may have had this experience, where that piece of food item is not on the menu because the ovens are not working, or you walk into McDonald's and the ice machine is not working and you cannot, or the McFlurry machine is not working, is the consistent one we hear about all the time. So not only repair and maintenance as a restaurant is a bad experience, it can actually impact your top line, customer experience, inventory problems. So much, much more mission critical. So very different dynamics on sort of like both the sides. In fact, we have many consumer maintenance or home services, founders of those companies invested in ResQ because there's a lot of interesting learning, but fundamentally operate in different spaces. To your second question, that is exactly the long-term vision. Once we get our hook into restaurants and these larger or independent groups, irrespective, repair and maintenance is a starting point for us. We want to eventually get into more and more of the back of the house. The back of the house is very, very complex. There's much more that goes into it than beyond just fixing a piece of equipment. Our vision is to tackle those things as we can layer in more and more services and launch the third or fourth or fifth side of the marketplace over time, which in some shape or form ties with our land and expand strategies. Once we have a restaurant, deliver great service to them today, but what are the other pieces we can tackle for them to truly own the entire experience of the back of the house?
Sorry, but now you say own the whole value chain in the back, but what about different industries? Let's say, okay, focus a similar industry, as you said, is hotels. What about that?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. So one is depth within the restaurants, how we expand our wallet share and offer additional services. The second is breadth into other markets, which is, as it turns out, the product and the supply that we have can be catered towards other commercial industries which have sort of similar equipment or similar needs. If you think about grocery stores, convenience stores, hotels, retirement homes, malls, arenas, food courts. We in fact have some customers in those verticals today who are already signed up on ResQ. Of course, our core DNA is in the restaurant space, and that is a big, big majority of our business. But eventually, we want to go into the broader commercial segment that we can take the exact same supply, some tweaks to the product, and take it into new markets.
Awesome. Thank you very much for sharing.
Those are great questions. So, hey, Rich, did you want to jump on?
Hey, yeah. So I'm building in the same space, so I know a lot about what you're saying. I'm curious, like, how do you get investors super excited about what you're doing? Because I think the word restaurant can put a lot of investors off. So how did you create that kind of like FOMO in this space?
Yeah, we've got great question. The fact that you're asking me the question means something you're experiencing today. We've kind of like got this double-edged sword, that impacts us. Like, one is, you're absolutely right, the word restaurant. Maybe early on in COVID was like, investors were very, very averse to it. I think that's changing a lot. There's so many, I've angel invested in a few companies myself, but there's so many restaurant tech companies, or generally hospitality tech companies or food tech companies that are getting capitalized by top tier funds. So I think the dynamics are changing because you're realizing companies like Olo and DoorDash and all these companies that have gone public at enormous valuations, that there is a big play to be made in this space. So I think that the emotion of that market has evolved from what it was in the first 6 to 8 months of COVID to what it is now. For us, there is the other piece, right? Our business in a lot of ways is unsexy. Think about repair and maintenance at a restaurant, and this is something we've consistently heard from even investors, like during our last fundraising or even before that, like, that repair and maintenance is not kind of like the sexy part of the market, which is totally fair. But the reality is like it's a market worth billions and billions and billions of dollars. It's a key pain point. We've got great customers who validated this for us, and we continue to grow and scale. And I believe like unsexy markets is truly operationally complex markets. And if you can build a great product and a great company in these markets, you can make it tremendously successful. So look, most of our fundraising journey is like showing the proof points along the way, right? Where we started, where we've come, showing metrics. Our cohort retention and growth is absolutely enormous in our cohorts, but really painting this sort of broader picture around like the key point that I mentioned earlier, which is land and expand. For us, is like we can land into this restaurant, and today we're only doing X, but what are the other natural things that we can layer on top to show that ResQ could easily turn into or I shouldn't say easily, but there is a pathway. There is no easy pathway, but there's a pathway to turn this into a company that could be worth billions and billions of dollars in one day. So that picture is important. Storytelling is important. Showing early proof points is important. Having happy customers is important. And look, at the end of and the key piece is like having a strong team. One of the key things that I've learned over the last few years is a lot of what we're building. And I don't think this is unique to the restaurant space, but I would say, in some shape or form it is go-to-market strategy is very important. Operational complexity of this vertical is very, very high. So how do you solve those operational pieces by bringing in a great team? How do you go to market strategy in a very quick and fast manner, being able to get large scale adoption? Those things actually get, in my perspective, more points when fundraising, and they should, because those are all the right things to do. Then showing product. I'm not saying product is not important. I absolutely think it is, but go to market. Go to market strategy, getting adoption, getting scale, solving some of the operational complexity, all underlined by building a great team, can answer some of those questions, which I know we were answered several times, and our investors had a lot of comfort around that when they invested in the company. That's
awesome. And I guess a quick follow-on question was around your go-to-market sales and marketing strategy. So did you lead with marketing and then follow with sales, or did you always start with sales?
Yeah, we've tried all sorts of things. We were never very heavy on marketing, to be honest, from day one. It was always like early days, 100% of the business growth, or very close to 100% of the business growth, came from advocacy and from the network. We didn't have a sales team internally. We had one fully ramped up, account executive that would essentially do this. Over time, especially in the last 12 months, we've sort of done some parts of marketing, but truly what's been successful for us is this high cadence SMB selling sort of model. And this is not unique to us. Many companies have done a tremendous job, and we learn from them. Really being able to get to sort of like running high cadences, as many restaurants as possible, doing a lot of calls, pushing them into demos, and really sort of like funnel optimization. We've been able to tighten that over time. And we didn't throw, 10 BDRs and 10 AEs at it from day one. We essentially had one BDR, one AE, really focus on optimizing that engine and making it successful. And now that, in the past few months, we've realized that we have a successful go-to-market strategy. Now we started to hire more BDRs, more AEs, and essentially, extend our team. But a lot of it is to do with like learning the right unit economics, learning cost of acquisition, learning what the LTV of these customers is on the back of building a team. Because you can absolutely fall in the other trap, which is, as it turns out, you can't, in the restaurant business, you can't charge too much dollars because margins are so thin. So how do you get away by knowing that only that's sort of like what you can charge from a revenue perspective, and how do you sort of like work backwards to figure out what the right economics, and how do you task the team? Now for us, what's interesting is what we start with is not the end point, it's the starting point, because we can show 4, 5, 6, 7x GMV retention and much more in that revenue retention in a period of time. But that sort of early optimizing for the funnel, understanding how much do you pay your BDRs, how much do you pay AEs, what's your true cost of acquisition, how many leads can they generate, all the great funnel stuff is very, very important that we started to do last year, and I think we've come to a good spot now. And now we've taken that recipe and said, let's hire more because we can replicate this and continue to make this better.
Amazing.
So,
I could
sorry, long answer to your question. And the short answer would be marketing is still a very, very, very small component of our spend. Very close to none, essentially. It's all been on the back of the strategy.
Awesome. I could ask a million questions. So maybe I'll follow up after an email.
I actually have a question myself. I'll come on then. Maybe Rich, if you have another question, you can jump on after. Hey, so Kuljeev, I actually had a question for you, and that is, on the customer side, this isn't really something like a consumer marketplace where maybe they're like looking for a vacation in advance, right? So this is probably like last minute, or at the time where they have an urgent need for repair. So how are you managing the availability and that kind of fill time or fill rate on that? And then my follow-up to that is going to be, what is the value or kind of incentive for some of the restaurants to invite their suppliers to your network?
Yeah, great question. So yes, there is a fine balance in this space so that's why we call it repair and maintenance. Repair bucket is essentially very last minute. I'd say about 60-70% of the repairs that happen are something is broken, I need a fix. Now, not everything needs to be done today. You've got particular categories. And again, these are learnings that we've discovered. But as it turns out, HVAC units, refrigeration units, hot water systems, maybe some plumbing issues, like those ones, you cannot delay them over a few hours at best. Versus some other categories like handiwork, electrical, maybe some broader sort of plumbing categories can be stretched out for a few days. And then, sorry, the remaining, I'd say 30% or so falls into the maintenance bucket, which is just regular, quarterly, monthly, semi-monthly, whatever the cadence is of categories, maintenance, which is hood cleaning, grease trap units, and all the kind of stuff. If someone comes in and continues to do that. What's interesting is that gives us a lot of visibility into spend, because a third or 40% of our business essentially is recurring, like it's on the maintenance side, and the remaining is repairs. And that changes. Every customer is a bit different, but that's kind of the rough spread. And look, based on that, you have to determine what's the right amount of supply that you need in every market. For us, what's interesting is our demand to supply ratio is not 1-to-1, because one company, a service partner company, could have 3 technicians working for them. And each one of them can do, 4 to 5 jobs in a day. So technically you could have one supplier, I would say, and then like 10 restaurants or 20 restaurants to cater within a region. That's not always true when you start. When you start, because you have to kind of fill the scorecard of all types of supply, and there's a long tail. We have about 21 or so, I believe, service categories, all the different things that I mentioned and much more. So when you start, even in a region, if you've got to have like 10 restaurants that are coming on board, you may still need to build a supply network of, 25 to 30 suppliers, because you need 1 to 2 suppliers per category to cover all the categories. But that number remains fairly constant. You can go from 10 to, 100, 150 restaurants, and your supply doesn't have to change. So it's just a little bit of heavy lifting up front, but then you sort of like really starts to pay you back when you're scaling restaurant side very fast, and the supply network does not need to expand as fast as the demand network. And in the early days, how we sort of overcome that is we allow you to bring your best supply. Like you could have, as a restaurant operator, you probably deal with, let's call it 15 different suppliers, or call it 21 different suppliers, one in each category. You may not like all your supply. You may only like some of your supply. So if you as a restaurant owner like 5 out of the 21 suppliers, bring your best supply onto the network. We're going to do the exact same thing with every other restaurant coming in the neighborhood. And all of a sudden, we got the best of the best supply that is being invited into the network. And we've got demand and supply to start transacting. And then over time, we build more demand and supply and sort of like, and match them.
Oh, that's super interesting. I was asking that is, in my mind, I was thinking of the example of Uber Eats drivers versus kind of Uber, when it comes to the transportation for the rideshare, and if there is some kind of overlap there, and how the supply kind of chooses to spend their time. So I was curious to see is there an overlap with like the repair and maintenance supply side, and then managing that. So
yeah, so look, the supply of this market is very, very interesting, right? Like at the end of the day, you're always, especially in the early days, you're always going to sort of like fall into this bucket of over optimizing for one side of the marketplace over the other. And that changes. But one thing that's been core to us, and we made that mistake earlier on too, and we realized like you have to build for both the sides. You can focus on the core experience on one side, but you can't get away by not providing value to the other side. So you got to build for demand, you got to build for supply. And look, your company's trajectory may define, sorry, each phase of the company's trajectory, you're going to go through some level of being constrained on one side of the marketplace. You may start with being, I don't know, demand constrained in the market. As you get so much demand, then you realize you're supply constrained. As you build a lot of supply, you realize, oh my God, we're back to demand constraint. I just think it's a constant back and forth, and you just have to build a muscle and a product that can cater to both the sides. So what we have done now, everything we've talked about from a restaurant perspective, we have actually mirroring products that we've launched and are launching on the supply side as well. So they get access to a beautiful looking and a very functional piece of software product that helps them manage their business and show them data and show them insights while we're driving more growth for them. That we didn't build that from day one. We built it after the restaurant company. You just kind of build both the sides to provide enough value so that they can see a tremendous amount of stickiness onto the product.
That's really great. Well, cool. So I'm gonna let Lucas jump back on for one last question. So, Lucas.
Thanks a lot. Probably a question that just has to belong into any marketplace. Chat is about disintermediation. I didn't expect 30% to be maintenance, and maintenance, as you say, quarterly, monthly. They have to do it. They have to do these checkups. This is perfect. Hey, well done. You did a good job. How about you come back next quarter? How do you handle it? Is that basically the solution? Is the SaaS saying it's so cool on here, or what you do?
So a very, very, very good one. And look, again, I'll go back to like we've learned over time. Early days, we would essentially shy away from matching the same supply to the same demand too many times to avoid what you just said. But what we've realized over time is if your core product provides so much value, you don't have to worry about disintermediation. So I'll talk about what that looks like. On the demand side, because we're hooking into all stakeholders into the business, when a business, a restaurant group of, I don't know, 5 or could be 250 restaurants, make a decision that we're going to use ResQ, they're fundamentally changing their workflow on how to manage repair and maintenance going forward. So we become, a lot of ways, their system of record. It's like, you know, your accounting system, or it's like your POS system, essentially. If you install a POS system, you're going to use the POS system because it's a top-down push to use it. So because we're tying to, again, going back to one of the key advantages of SaaS-enabled marketplace, you get all the stakeholders involved, and you provide value to every stakeholder into the on the customer side. They essentially make a decision to repair and maintenance, and us becoming their system of record in a lot of ways for R&M. So we become the single source of truth. So every time there is a repair and maintenance invoice that is, for some reason, the local general manager at a restaurant called the local supplier to do, the person who's approving accounting or area manager is going to say, why didn't you push this through ResQ? This should be through ResQ, right? So you kind of get this like interesting way to kill the disintermediation on that side. Second piece on the supply side is also equally important, which is we drive enormous amount of growth for supply. For them to get one job that they want to do outside of the network is a risk for them. So many times, even in the early days, we saw the suppliers call us and say, hey, maybe by mistake that restaurant called me directly, but really should be submitting a job to ResQ. So because we're driving growth, paying them faster, doing all these sort of very interesting things on the supply side, supply helps us cut the disintermediation too. And what that led to is now us going back and saying, actually, there's a lot of value in being able to match the same supply to the same restaurant. Not too many times, but just enough, right? For example, if you're a refrigeration technician, you fix the unit once, you spend some time learning about the history of that equipment and knowing what to do. If that issue happens again in 30, 45 days, you're likely the best person to go back and do it because you've already tried 4 other things that didn't work and you found something that worked, rather than trying to send someone new. So some categories, it's important. We essentially call it the continuity of information. Like, it's important to know what has been done. So now we surface all the equipment history, what's been done in the past to anyone going and doing the repairs. Some categories, it's irrelevant. So again, plumbing maybe, and some of the non-specialized or low specialized categories, you can get away with just matching new supply and new demand. But we see a lot of value because if we can continue to cater to the restaurants to bring the same supply that you like through the product and provide value to both the sides of the spectrum, that is a great way for us to maintain stickiness.
That sounds very cool. That's exactly what I wanted to hear, sort of. It's
almost like we use it to our advantage. We use the idea of calling the same supply and building a relationship to our advantage by building the right product that has deep hooks on both the sides.
So I understand that. Are you guys even? There would be a follow-up question, if that's okay. Going, sort of deeper as well. Are you guys tracking what has been done in the sort of sense? Hey, dear supply, tell me what you did. So this is another option for the restaurant. They can track their basically state, what has been done last, rather than having, there was some guy here a couple weeks ago.
Absolutely. So everything gets surfaced. So again, kind of going back to the product on the restaurant side, at the core, we're connecting demand and supply to do repairs. All that data on a piece of equipment, on history, is being tracked and being surfaced in our core sort of, the software product that we have. And now you can go in and see spend comparison by location. You can go and see spend comparison by categories. It's very interesting things actually. There's an example we tell all our customers, like I can't remember, maybe a couple of years ago, one restaurant group I think they had 20 plus restaurants in their portfolio, and all of them on ResQ. Through the data we surfaced them, they were able to actually see that one location plumbing spend was 5 times more than the average plumbing spend across other locations. When they started diving in deeper, they realized staff was shoving hairnets into the drains, which was causing a lot of plumbing issues. So they took that as an opportunity to train their staff. So what you can do with this great data is insights, decision-making, repairs versus fix. I've already spent $15,000 on this piece of equipment. Why do I have to spend more money? Whether I can go and buy something new that will stretch me out for another 10 years. So those are all kind of the software layer, the value of the software layer and the data that provides.
Exactly. That would have been the question that I wanted to ask. What you do with the data. It's a hell of another selling point for your B2B customers.
Absolutely. And look, there's interesting things we have done over time, like being able to surface this data to make better procurement decisions over time. I can tell you today, after looking at a data, what's the best coffee machine to buy, which breaks it. You may end up buying one coffee machine because it costs 50% less, but I can tell you in a period of, X amount of time, what's the repair cost of maintaining that coffee machine. So procurement decisions, that is kind of the longer tail of going into the back of the house, better procurement decisions, better decisions on understanding like how equipment gets maintained over time, what's the true cost of that over time. Those are all very much the core of the product we want to build.
And I would like to follow up on this one again, because this is a very interesting thing that you put out, products, because you are, it's what I'm trying to wrap my head around in my case as well. You have a product in the center. So you're always working on one product that has a specification. It was bought somewhere. It is installed in other places as well. Is this basically one data point? So this is coffee machine XYZ by supplier XYZ, and you're tracking across those as well? Or is it free text and you don't quite know what you're doing with it?
Yeah, so what we do is we essentially create a digital footprint of all your equipment onto our platform. So if I go and log into our system and I click on a restaurant right now, I'll see all the 50 pieces of equipment they have down to the model number, serial number, all the information. And then we just track the repair and maintenance history on that over time. Now, we can't go and get previous history because what you've done in the last 2 years, unfortunately, I don't have that information. But going forward, all your equipment and data, and then again, that creates stickiness, right? All the data is on our system, so it creates stickiness for the product.
Nice. Okay, thank you very much. That's very interesting to hear how you're utilizing this as well. Sorry, and then are you asking for it at the beginning, or is it by each repair request or maintenance request those are added?
So we do a little bit of heavy lifting up front to gather as much information as possible during the onboarding process. Still very seamless. And look, as we're, some restaurant groups are sophisticated. They actually have model number, serial number, and all this sort of equipment. It's probably sitting in an Excel spreadsheet. Sophistication definition, but which we can easily digest, but we do a little bit of heavy lifting up front as part of our onboarding to gather the data.
Great. Awesome. Thank you very much for sharing.
Awesome. Thanks, Lucas. We got a few questions in there on that one. So little did you know how deep we were going to go on this, Kuljeev, right? So I feel like we could.
No, this is good. I love this.
Yeah, we could go on.
That we think about every single day.
Exactly. So, well, this is incredibly insightful. So thanks again for taking the time to join us and share more. I wanted to ask one last kind of question for you myself to wrap things up, which is, what's one maybe a memorable moment or story that you can share with us throughout your journey?
Throughout the journey of building ResQ? Yeah, I'd say there's been so many, right? Like, look, operating in the restaurant space is exceptionally complex and at the same time exceptionally interesting. It's a I've always been a big sort of proponent of this industry. I believe what we're doing is solving a fundamental pain point. We're a very, very mission-driven team. Not only we want to just build a great company, we fundamentally want to change the trajectory of how restaurant operators and restaurant owners manage their restaurants to make restaurant business a very good, profitable, and high-thriving business. The reality is there's many things that happen in a restaurant that probably are very low impact from day-to-day standpoint. Sorry, high impact from a day-to-day standpoint, but requires a lot of focus. Repair and maintenance being the key one. Where if we can give the time back to that restaurant manager to go back and focus on guest experience and driving revenue and building great menu items, imagine that world versus focusing on, hey, where's my plumber and why is my plumber not here? So we want to change the direction of this industry, both in the restaurant and the service partner side. I do want to mention that. I think it's important that side of the market has been overlooked. There's been very little innovation that's happened in commercial R&M. If you look at the broader bucket, and we want to fundamentally change the trajectory of that industry too. So very, very mission-driven team and organization, very close to sort of our vision and working hard towards making that impact for the industries and the communities. The key sort of, one was obviously like anyone operating in the space cannot shy away from telling you about early days of COVID. Like for us, March 16th, I can't forget that day when we heard we were hearing the impact of COVID, but no one thought that that's how quickly the switch would go off. And because we're in the R&M business, repair maintenance business, and because restaurants were shutting down, we had an intense amount of work to cancel or suspend their repairs. Anything that was about to happen in the coming days or any maintenance contract they had to be paused. Imagine restaurants shut down, contractor shows up, they're going to charge for the visit. Restaurants don't have any money to pay, right? So that could lead to bad experiences. Those few days leading up to, coming after that date in March was immensely chaotic. And the few weeks following where we had to put our heads down, rethink our business, rethink what we want to do and how we want to provide value by staying very, very true to who we are as a company and our DNA and what we wanted to do for our communities and the industry was one of the best times, in my sort of, career. Like I really embraced that challenge. I think it's made the team so much stronger. Of course, don't enjoy the fact that, COVID's impact to this world has been absolutely, bad. And I wish that wasn't there, but looking at how we matured as the organization, we've come a long way because of what the journey we've taken over the last 12 to 18 months. So to me, I can never forget that. It's a challenge I embrace every day. And I think if I look at the challenges we're solving today, a lot of it stems from how we acted and how we navigated through the pandemic earlier on. It made the team stronger. It made us more resilient. And look, we did a lot of things. Like midsummer last year, we mobilized our entire community to buy large quantities of meals from restaurants to keep them running by raising hundreds of thousands of dollars in fundraising and providing those meals over to frontline healthcare workers. Like we came together, not just providing value to our customers and helping them. We essentially, mobilized the entire ecosystem to help them during COVID. And those are the things that I take sort of like hold very close to my heart, because that is truly what a mission-driven team sort of can do. It is not just you move forward, you take your entire community and your entire industry forward.
That's an incredible way to wrap it up. So, I mean, huge, first off, huge congrats to you and the team, for making it through. But not only that, but, evolving and the recent growth and yeah, definitely making an impact already. So I know you have quite a few fans here in the community now too. So
thank you so much. Well, look, this was a pleasure. Sorry about that. Just been around great people and learning from our mistakes and continuously moving forward. So if I can share any learnings, I would love to learn from each one of you. There's a lot of things we've gotten right, but there's many, many, many things we're still trying to get right. So love to stay connected. I appreciate the opportunity to be sharing our experiences here and really enjoyed the conversation today.
Awesome. Well, this is great. Thanks again. I mean, this was really a good one where we dove pretty deep into things. So thanks. And then thanks for the great questions. So
thank you, everyone.